Hello guys, welcome to Mr. Story Channel. Whether you're here for the juicy drama, hilarious fails, or the most wholesome moments, we've got it all. So, grab your popcorn, sit back, and let's dive into the best stories on Reddit. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss our videos. It's time for our first story. Am I the jerk for walking out of a restaurant and going home when my wife was being insecure? My wife, Kelly, has been feeling really insecure lately because her best friend is going through a messy divorce after finding out her husband was cheating. Kelly is very close to her friend and has been supporting her emotionally. This has made my wife anxious about our relationship, even though nothing has happened between us. She claims that seeing her friend's marriage fall apart is why she has gotten more insecure. We have had many conversations about this. Also, many conversations when she is being unfair to me for her new insecurities in our relationship. Anyway, she wanted to go to a new restaurant for her birthday. We got there, and the moment she saw our waitress, she was cold and had an attitude toward the server. After she took our drinks, she accused me of flirting with the waitress. I wasn't. I told her to stop and be polite to the server. I pointed out that she is being unfair with me again, and if she doesn't act polite, then I will be leaving. Our waitress came back with our drink and asked if we wanted appetizers. My wife was giving an attitude and glaring. She snapped and said we needed more time. At that point, I told her I would be taking a lift back home and that I wouldn't stay where she was being a jerk to the staff and unfair to me. I went home. She came back home a few hours later, and we had a huge fight about me leaving on her birthday. I reminded her that I warned her that I would, and her insecurities are the reason I left. She thinks I am a huge jerk, and we are not talking. Well, looks like OP's wife is letting her insecurities get the best of her and putting her own marriage in danger. But let's see what the community have to say about it. Someone said, "So picture how it would have gone if you'd stayed." My guess? She would have kept sniping at you throughout the meal. She may even have escalated her behavior with the waitress and humiliating her. At the end of the night, you still would have had a fight when you got home. But instead of being about leaving her on her birthday, it would have been you flirting with the waitress the whole night. Does that sound likely to you? If it does, recognize that your wife is putting you in a no-win scenario. There is nothing you can do to stop her from being mad at you. Imagine if you were incredibly rude and blanked the waitress the whole night. Do you think your wife would have been angry with you for that? I do. My advice, if you want it, is to be very clear with her that she needs to seek therapy over her insecurities because you will not bear the brunt of them any longer. Set boundaries for yourself and enforce them, like you did on her birthday, but without engaging in the argument after. I truly cannot tell if you did, to be honest. I'm just saying protect your peace. And by the way, you are not the jerk. If you were in OP's place, would you have done anything different? Tell me in the comments. If you are enjoying these stories, please give it a like and subscribe. We are trying to reach our first 100 subscribers. Thank you, and let's go for our next petty revenge story. So won't you move your car? Enjoy the hour-long wait and a car accident. The other day I, 25 male, was delivering fuel to a gas station. This station was set up where the tank access lids are right by the parking spots. For me to be in a position to dump fuel, I need to block all of the parking spots in front of the building. There's usually a car or two in the way, and I can usually patiently wait until I'm clear to pull in. If it's a busy time of day, I put cones up as cars leave to prevent anyone else from pulling in until I've moved into position. But this time, a lady in a Tesla absolutely couldn't handle parking 50 feet away and had to move my cone to park right in front of the door. I hopped out of my truck and went inside to ask her to move so I could deliver the gas, and she told me, "Get bent. You can wait until I'm done here." So I pulled my truck in behind her with about 2 inches to spare between my truck axles and her bumper. I set my brakes and began hooking up hoses to unload. Since I couldn't park in the ideal position, my large 3-inch hose was too short to reach the hole, so I used my 2-inch hose, which is longer but does limit flow rate by about 33%. No sooner than 5 seconds after I've opened my valve to start the fuel delivery, she comes out screaming that she's in a hurry and I need to move my truck before she calls the cops for harassment. I told her, "Get bent. You can wait until I'm done here." She asked me how long it would take. I informed her that normally it would be about 45 minutes, but because I had to use my smaller hose, I figured about an hour and 15 minutes. She stormed off and got in her car and called the cops. About 10 minutes later, 2 officers arrive and ask what the problem is. She wants me arrested for harassment. A gas station employee sides with me, saying the woman was rude and belligerent and I'm just here to do my job. The cops tell her she's just going to have to wait, and they leave. I took my sweet time unloading and doing my paperwork. All in all, she waited an hour and a half before I moved my truck when I left. As I was waiting to pull out of the parking lot, she zoomed around me and pulled out into the street, directly into the path of oncoming traffic. She was T-boned by a lifted pickup with a heavy-duty cattle guard bumper. Her Tesla was totaled, and the pickup was completely unscathed. She was not injured, but I almost had an asthma attack from laughing so hard. Looks like now Karen know the meaning of mess around and find out. And for our next story, I fished my neighbor's car. Okay, so about 4 months ago, my husband and I moved into a new apartment complex with our dog. It is a massive upgrade from the area we lived before, and we were very excited to have a home we were proud to host in. For reference, this complex is mainly condos and townhomes, and the general population is couples or roommates in their mid-20s to mid-30s, some with children. All was well until about 3 weeks ago. I was coming home from work and heading into our condo when I noticed 2 very young, late teens/early 20s, boys carrying grocery bags of loose silverware, plates, and kitchen utensils. I didn't recognize them and thought maybe they were guests to someone above. Later that evening, I was taking my dog for a walk and saw them again. This time using the same grocery bags carrying clothes and shoes, none of which looked new. I then realized they were moving in, using Walmart bags. I didn't mind and laughed it off. I remember being young and broke. I then questioned how 2 most likely 18-year-old boys could afford the rent at this place. That's when I noticed their shirts. Some combination of Greek letters plastered over the chest with the Playboy bunny ears on the pocket. Great. Mommy and Daddy have paid for them to stay in a nice fancy condo to party. I tried not to be judgmental and just smiled and waved and went about my day. Unfortunately, my assumptions were correct. That night around 8 p.m., the screams and woos of college girls, stomping, loud music, and obnoxious frat boys talking over the music began. I didn't mind because it was Friday and I've been there, done that. However, I did mind when it was 4 a.m. and still going. I promise I'm not being a total snob. For reference, I'm 26. It wasn't too long ago I was at frat parties. However, we weren't doing this in a generally quiet neighborhood where people had kids and jobs that started at 7 a.m. So the parties continued all weekend, all day, pretty much with just a small break between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. It is important to note that these boys drive matching Dodge Chargers, and their vehicles are pretty much stationary. I think they only leave to hit the liquor store. I decided to write to the leasing office. They sent out a mass email about keeping noise done, and nothing else has happened. For the past 3 weeks, I've had to deal with these parties probably every other night. I'm not sure if it was my sleep deprivation or the wine, but about 3 days ago, I was walking my dog at 11 p.m. I had had a few glasses of wine and was relaxing. My dog took off towards a specific area in the grass, dragging me behind her, and there, to my surprise, was a fish. A whole fish. I started giggling because, what on earth? How did that get there? Then I look up. Not 2 feet away is a Dodge Charger. I can hear the music bumping from outside and across the parking lot. I don't know what came over me, but I used a doggy bag to pick up the dead fish, and I placed it on the hood of the Charger. I'm writing this a few days later, and the fish is still there, so clearly they haven't noticed. My husband isn't very observant, so he's yet to point out the fish somehow. Every time it catches my eye, though, I burst out into laughter, but I don't have the heart to tell him that his deliriously tired, wine-drunk wife is a little bit immature. Oh well. I'm now placing mental bets on how long it will take those kids to find the fish. Edit. I'm loving all the extra suggestions to go alongside the fish, but I really don't want to cause enough damage to where we could get in the realm of having a property damage case against me. This was more of a drunken silly, take that, to the spoiled brats. And for our next story. Am I the jerk for telling my brother he betrayed Mom? So why would he get half of everything? My mom died a few months ago, and she left my brother, 40 male, some money, but I got most of what she owned. Some background to explain why Mom did this and why my brother is angry. My mom was an only child for 16 years, and she always wanted to get involved in her dad's business. But he didn't want a girl or woman taking over the family business. He was determined to have a son one way or another, and even though mom was prepared to leave school and work for him, by the time her brother came along, he made it very clear that even if there was no son, he would never let her work for him and take over one day. He would rather see the business close. This destroyed my mom. She loved her parents and felt so rejected. Mom's dad didn't get his way, however, because her brother wanted nothing to do with the business and refused to even work for him, let alone take over. My mom was estranged from her dad for many years because her dad made it painfully clear to her that he didn't value a daughter and never would. So mom stepped back. But when he heard mom had a son, he reached out, and when that didn't work, he waited until my brother was 18, and he offered him a job and the chance to run the family business. My mom was shocked, and my brother told her she better not tell him not to accept because he didn't like the fact she kept us from our grandfather and prevented him running the business with the estrangement. Mom and him had a talk. She said she did not want him to grow up with the same disregard for women as her dad. He basically told her to go and duck herself, and he went to work for her dad. Years passed, and he regretted the strain between him and mom, and dad was disgusted with him too. He reached out after dad died, apologized, and told mom he loved her. But things were never the same, and he talked about her dad like he was some amazing hero of a guy, which was so difficult for my mom. So apparently when mom had her will made, she decided that I should get the most and my brother should get something but not an equal share, given he had the business and seemed perfectly okay, with her being shut out of it for being born the wrong gender. My brother is hurt and angry about this now that she's gone. He asked me how she could have done this and why I'm not angry. I told him he betrayed mom, so why would he get half? He tried to say he didn't, but I told him he went to work for her dad anyway, and then basically told her to go duck herself, and even when they reconciled, he acted like the father who treated her like crap was some amazing person who needed his praises sang all the time. He said I was crapping on him for no real reason. Well, we clearly have a lot of unresolved issues in this family. Do you think that OP's mom have done the right thing in her will? Let me know in the comments. And for our next story, am I the jerk for not allowing my son to be punished after he refused to do his school presentation? My son George just turned 13 this month. George is very bright, projected to get 8s or 9s in his general certificate of secondary education, and regularly achieves these grades in his mock exams and assessments. But he struggles socially and has been bullied badly in the past. Things are better now, but he isn't popular. As part of his personal development class, he had to create a children's toy and give a sales pitch to the class. Last Friday was the presentation day, and George was really excited. He'd put a lot of effort into his toy and the presentation, but I got a notification saying George had been given an after-school detention, something he's never received before. He'd refused to participate in class and didn't do his presentation. When I picked him up, I could tell immediately that he was upset. I asked him what happened and why he didn't do the presentation. He said he didn't refuse the presentation. When it was his turn, he asked to go later. His teacher said no, and that he had to do it then or get an after-school detention. George said he couldn't do it now, but didn't explain further when asked, so he was given the after-school detention. I kept pressing him, worried that maybe he was being bullied again. Eventually, he told me the real reason. He had a random erection just before his turn and, no matter what, it wouldn't go down. With that info, I think George's request was perfectly reasonable. He didn't refuse to do the presentation. He simply asked to do it a little later. Obviously, he didn't want to explain the reason in front of the whole class when the teacher asked him. His mom was really angry with him for getting the after-school detention. I explained what happened and said I didn't think George was wrong. I said I'm not supporting the detention and would pick him up at the normal time. When I told his mom what happened, she looked disgusted and said something like, "Why did he even have one in class to begin with?" I explained that random erections happen, especially in early puberty, and they don't always relate to sexual thoughts, which is what she was assuming. She replied, "Well, I'm not sure that's true," dismissing what I said. So I told her, "You might not be sure, but I am." She insisted we needed to present a united front, along with the school, and that by going against her, I was sending George the wrong message. I asked why her way of handling it was automatically right, and why I should be the one to concede. It escalated into a big argument, which we haven't had in years. She's saying she is going to punish him for refusing when it's her week with him next week, and that I am being a jerk for going against her. Her mother texted me, saying I was setting a bad example for George by letting him get away with being disrespectful to his teacher, which he wasn't even, just asked to do his presentation later. I respectfully told her she should mind her own business and that George was my son. But now I'm worrying whether I've done the right thing, and I need some outside perspectives. Guys, I must say that was a little surprising to me. But I completely understand why OP is supporting his son in this situation. But let's see what the community have to say about it. Someone said, puberty is a difficult time in a kid's life, and having random episodes like this in class does not help. Your wife may need a lesson in biology from the male perspective. Unless she is a medical doctor, how would she know what happens in the male body at that age? Everyone talks about the big stuff, but there are lots of little things that go on at random times. Puberty can be interesting for some kids. Kudos to you for supporting your son in what is otherwise an embarrassing moment he tried his best to avoid, and hopefully he doesn't feel ashamed for what he had no control over. It happens just like the need to sneeze at an inopportune moment. You may need to sit your wife down and have an honest discussion from the male point of view on puberty. Just like you may not know everything that goes on with women in puberty, she may not know. You may still reach out to the teacher and explain the situation. He wasn't being disrespectful, just trying to avoid the shame and bullying that would have been bound to come if he did his presentation right then. How would you guys deal with this unusual situation? I am honestly curious to know. Tell me in the comments. And for our next story, would I be the jerk if I changed my unborn son's name after finding out my sister is using the same name for my nephew? My husband and I, both 20s, chose a name for our son early in my pregnancy. We didn't tell anyone the name, but my sister, 30 female, snuck into the nursery to peek at what we'd done and saw the name on the wall. She's also pregnant and said she wanted inspiration for her baby nursery. Then she decided that because the cousins being born so close together they should share the same first name. And she told me it would be so cool to continue the tradition of multiple family members with the same name. My sister never shared a name with a cousin. She had a family name where she was the only living person with it in the family. I did share a name with 3 cousins and an uncle, and I hated it. I chose to use my middle name mostly because it was unique in terms of the family. Not unique in general, but nobody else in my family had my middle name, so I used that more than my first name. Though some family members refused to call me anything else. My husband was disappointed like me when I learned about my sister had decided to use the name, and we started talking about changing the name. We decided to scrap the one we had originally chosen, and we covered over it in the nursery. My sister and mom saw the finished nursery a couple of days ago, and my sister asked about the name, and she told me she was hurt we were changing it. She said she had been so excited for the cousins to share a name. I told her I wanted my son to not share a name with anyone in the family. My mom said she thought it was amazing to have a few people with the same name in a family, that it was a special connection between them. I told them I disagreed. They said I was overreacting and would be mean to change my son's name after my sister was so excited for our boys to have the same first name. My husband said my family has an issue with boundaries and accepting a difference of opinion. And I'm coming to realize that, yeah, it even shows with some of them refusing to accept my name and the fact my sister snooped on the nursery in the first place and then chose the name without asking if I'd be okay with it. And here we have one more unusual family drama. And for our last story of today, am I the jerk for telling my dad I won't join him for the anniversary of mom's death if my half-siblings are there? My mom died almost a year ago. She had cancer for 3 years. Her death was really hard for me, 16 female. But what made things even worse was that I felt like my half-siblings, 23 and 25, were giddy about the fact mom had died. She was their stepmother for 20 years. They lost their mom 13 years ago, and I know how much they still miss her. They would always get really on edge on the anniversary of her death. I even saw them cry a few times. They never liked me seeing that, though, and would tell me to get lost. My half-siblings used to blame my mom for their mom's death. They'd say it should have been my mom instead of theirs. I get that they were kids, so I'm not going to say I hate them for feeling that way. But I think that hatred for my mom living longer than theirs stayed. I remember they never came to see my mom when she was sick, and they weren't here when she died, and when they showed up, they seemed so happy. They acted like it was no big deal. I could hear them laughing and giggling while Dad and I were going through funeral plans. A couple of relatives said it seemed so disrespectful for them to be so joyful around us, and how could they not hold it given Dad and I had lost Mom? Others thought they should at least look like they cared a little. But then I also heard them laugh off someone who tried to offer them sympathy at the funeral, saying Mom wasn't anything to them and they didn't care. A few weeks after the funeral, they had taken down all traces of Mom from their places, and they had photoshopped her out of photos they posted online because now that she's gone, they can make them look like they wanted. Dad was so hurt, and they argued. But now Dad is trying to talk them into joining us for her anniversary coming up. They already said no, and said they have nothing to grieve and they don't miss her. But Dad still wants us to be together as a family. I told him I wouldn't be there if they were. That I'm not about to spend the day with people who seem like they're glad Mom's dead. I said she isn't their mom, but she is mine, and I love and miss her and don't want to be around people who show so much joy that she's gone. Dad told me he needs me, and we should all be together, but I said no to that. To be clear, my dad and their mom didn't break up because of an affair. My mom was not the reason my dad and my half-sibling's mom broke up at all. Hey everyone, that's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching until the end. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed what you saw and want to stay updated, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications bell. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when I release new videos, and you'll be helping to support the channel. So, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and let's keep this journey going together. Thanks again and see you soon.